Hello, friends, and happy Friday. Thank you for listening to the Friday Conversation. Welcome to Page Tuning. And Phyllis, will you give us an introduction, please?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. My name is Phyllis Leavitt, and I am a psychotherapist and an author. I've written two books about my own kind of healing journey and spiritual journey, and they're called A Light in the Darkness and Into the Fire. And my latest book is a little bit of a departure from that, not totally, but somewhat. And it's called America in Therapy, a new approach to hope and healing for a nation in crisis. And so my latest book is really about how we could bring the healing principles and understandings of the best psychotherapy and psychology to help heal the great divides in our nation and the escalating violence and the difficulty that so many people are having kind of crossing the aisle to try to actually work things out for the good of the country and for all of our citizens rather than keep this ongoing battle of who's right and who's wrong going. So, and really the link, I think, between my own inner development and then writing this book was really seeing that the injuries that we have to our own in our own conditioning, the negative things we've experienced or the negative beliefs we've taken on about ourselves, we bring into the world around us.
Mhm.
And to really develop ourselves, for many people, there's some kind of healing that needs to take place so that we start to believe more positive things and develop more positive coping mechanisms. And these same principles can be applied to a country. So that's the link.
Yeah, I think pretty good timing considering we're going into the height of the election season. So it's
Right.
it's very, very timely. But what was the spark that made you write America in Therapy? What was it? Was there a certain event or what made you write the book?
Yeah, what really made me write the book was I had my own childhood trauma, as so many people who go into a healing profession do.
Hmm.
So when I did my own work, which is an ongoing process, but when I did like the really heart of it, when I was in my mid 30s, was when I first went to therapy. And I was really at a critical place in my life. I was very, very depressed and very,
Hmm.
very highly anxious. And I had not really remembered the traumas that had happened to me, and they were starting to bubble up from my unconscious. So it was a really difficult time. And going to therapy, it really, as a process of really working through and remembering and sort of unearthing the essential self that was buried beneath some of the things that had happened to me that were painful, was very life changing for me. And
Hmm.
so that's what had me become a therapist. And then I just began to realize how many people, are suffering from unhealed trauma. They're a mystery to themselves. They don't know why they react and think and behave the way they do. Um, and not only that, but how many people really don't even have access to that understanding or
Hmm.
access to healing. And many people, not just in the United States, but around the world, have no way to escape the traumas that are plaguing them: war and poverty and discrimination and religious persecution or persecution for the color of their skin.
Hmm.
And that we have so many traumatized people in the world because of the dysfunction of our largest family systems
Hmm.
that advocate policies that really hurt a lot of people, just the way an abusive person in a family can hurt so many people and cause them to become highly symptomatic. So I really wanted to take that apart for the average person so that we can better understand why it's so important, why it's critical today to treat each other well, to really examine our behaviors in our own lives, in our own communities, and in our highest positions of authority and government. Are the things that we're doing to each other, are they healthy? Are they healthy for us? Are they healthy for others? And if we don't stop them, what are the expected results? And we're seeing them. We're seeing threats of violence. We're seeing mass shootings. We're seeing,
Hmm.
many, many children and families living in poverty, homeless rates rising. Um, and what does the field of psychology have to offer that could help us heal? So
Hmm.
that's really the point of the whole of that. That was the inspiration. It was sort
Hmm.
of my own journey mushrooming out into an awareness of the larger issues around me.
You mentioned in your 30s when you felt those the past traumas bubbling up. For people who, because I know a lot of people who won't go to therapy or are afraid to go to therapy, was that
Right.
a difficult decision for you to take that step? And if so, what advice would you give to people who are struggling with that decision to seek help?
Yeah, it's a great question because I'll tell you the very first time I went to a therapy session, and the only time before that was when I was in college. And I don't actually remember the circumstances, but I had a friend who said, "Why don't you go talk to somebody?" So he must have seen something about me that I was trying to hide, right? Um, and so I went to the college campus counselor, and I don't remember anything that I said to her.
Hmm.
I don't remember anything she said to me, but what I do remember is that I felt so vulnerable and so exposed that I never went back. And I think there's a lot of stigma around therapy that it's a sign of weakness. You should be able to figure it out yourself. Why do you need somebody else? Um, a lot. I think there's really, and I think the stigma was worse when I was younger, but I think it's still there for many people
Hmm.
that it's that if you, and there's other associations that it's not good to be dependent on somebody else for your emotional needs. We have such a thing, and especially in America, about being independent and strong and being self-made, and we're just like these islands of independence, and that's
Hmm.
considered sexy and attractive, and it's really a disservice to our emotional nature where we really need safe, loving connection. But at that time, I never went back because it was too vulnerable for me, and I probably just wasn't ready.
Hmm.
But by the time I was in my 30s, I was at such a low place in my life, and many people that I knew at that time were going to therapy, and I think that encouraged me. And what I would say to people is, it's anything but a sign of weakness. It really takes strength to peel back the layers of what hurt you, face your own dysfunctional behaviors, face the things that you might have done that were hurtful to other people, as well as what happened to you that might have hurt you, for the sake of healing, for the sake of not of blame of anyone, certainly not of yourself, not for the sake of shame of anyone or yourself, but really for the sake of, and I say it this way, that we can peel back the layers and find that essential self that was always there
Hmm.
before anything happened to us or we did anything, um, and that part is retrievable. And I don't know if there's anything better in life than to really get in touch with that deeply essential part of ourselves. Because what I have found for myself, and I've found that I've worked with hundreds of people over the years, that part of us is always loving. It's always caring. It's always constructive. And very often it's highly creative and really has a lot to offer if we could peel back the layers of what has repressed us or shamed us or blamed us.
Hmm. And for someone who is taking that step and looking for someone to talk to or someone to help them, where does someone start with that process? Because there's lots of options. So if you're
Right.
looking for, is it important to look for someone who fits kind of what you're looking for, or is there a method that someone can use to find the right match for them?
Well, the two things that I think of, and I think this would be number one for me, would be get a recommendation from somebody who's worked with somebody that they felt really good about.
Hmm.
Because when someone comes highly recommended by someone that you trust, there's already an invitation for it to work. It may or may not. But I think it's just like if you were going to go to a mechanic for your car, you're going to ask around who's the best mechanic in town for a Toyota or a Subaru, right?
That's true.
And
Yeah.
and I think it's no different for our mental and emotional health, and it might even be more important. The second thing I would say, though, well, I guess there's three things. The second thing I would say is if someone doesn't feel like the right fit for you, don't work with them, because not everybody is the right fit. I've gone to people that were great, and I've gone to people that it didn't mesh.
Mm.
And I think it's really important to trust your own instincts. Um, and so it might take a few visits with 3 different people before you find the person. Aha, I feel really seen by this person. I feel comfortable with them. They're highly recommended. They've told me how they would work with me. It feels like a good match. And the other thing I would say is, if at some point in your process, because this can happen, something comes up for you that makes you uncomfortable, talk about it, because a good therapist can work it out with you. A not good therapist will become defensive and blame you. And I've seen all of that happen. So yeah, trust your instincts. I mean, that's part of why you're going to therapy, is because most of us have been cut off from some of our deepest knowing for one reason or another. And the third thing I would just say, and I think this is really third, but could be very important, there are different ways of working with people. Some people work from a hypnosis model, or an inner child model, or an EMDR model, or a psychotherapeutic, psychodynamic model, or a behavioral model. So if there's a model that you know of that maybe someone has shared with you that really sounds like, whoa, I'd really like to do some hypnosis, or I want to do some deep inner child work, then look for that person who does that kind of work. And many therapists do several, approaches. So.
Wow. Yeah, it's really great advice, really great information. And previously you mentioned the policies that are contributing to the crisis that we're experiencing. What are some of those policies that are most harmful?
Well, I'll start by telling you, because you'll see the direct correlation and it won't be hard to make the jump. In an abusive family or a highly dysfunctional family, what happens is one or more people have all the power. You can't hurt someone unless you have power over them. And obviously, in a governmental system, there are people who have power over many people. That doesn't mean they will harm them, but they have the opportunity to do that if they're not mentally well themselves. So in an abusive family, the power is held by it's often one person. They usually target the most vulnerable people in the family, the ones that won't or can't fight back. That might be children because they're smaller. It might be a spouse because that spouse is very, sort of retiring and submissive or passive. So they target people who are vulnerable. They hurt them for their own reasons, whether it's physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional or mental abuse, withholding resources, kicking them out of the house, whatever it is that they do out of their own wounding, which is out of their own wounding. Not to excuse it, but that's where it comes from. That's how this stuff gets passed down from one generation to another. And then their victims become symptomatic. They become depressed, they become anxious, they become addicted, they become violent, they fail to thrive in school, they're aggressive toward other children, or they don't come out of their room, or they're wetting the bed, or they have excessive fears. And then an abusive person will punish and blame their own victims for their symptoms. And that is something that's happening in our country and really around the world. Right. And then they blame them for their symptoms. And so it's a really double bind, because our symptoms are a natural response to being mistreated. If somebody stabs you in your body, you're going to have physical symptoms. If they hurt you in your mental and emotional well-being, you're going to have symptoms in your behavior, in your feelings, in whatever. So that's part of it. And then another dynamic, there's several other big dynamics that you see in abusive families that you also see in abusive systems, larger systems, whether it's a community, a business, a school, a church, a government. And that is that when people really try to get help and call out the truth of what's happening, they're often hurt worse. We have peaceful demonstrators who are being tear gassed and shot with rubber bullets, or being maligned, or, being ostracized, or, having terrible things be said about them, and sometimes killed. sometimes killed. So an abusive person or an abusive system will try to silence the truth tellers in any way possible. Another really big outcome of untreated abuse that happens in families and also in larger systems is that many people are rewarded for cooperating with an abuser. They get special privileges, they get money, they get more freedoms. And we have that happens in abusive homes, and I've seen that in my practice. I've heard a million stories of different dynamics, and we definitely see that in our society, that some people are rewarded for complying with abusive policies, behaviors, and actions. And so it's a tight web. It can really form a very tight web. And so for me, the impulse was to look at what's going on in our country through that lens of what's a healthy family and what's a dysfunctional or abusive family. Again, not ultimately to blame anyone, but to say, this is what psychology has to offer. Do we even know what we're caught in when the people are hurling horrible lies about each other in the news, or maligning each other, or calling them names, or threatening, or, because those are the same dynamics that happen in an abusive or dysfunctional family. And what does psychology have to offer? So one of the things is we can talk about in a healthy family, and nobody's perfect. Nobody does this perfect. We all are learning, right? We're all surviving something, and we're all learning how to do it better if we want to. But in a healthy family, basically, you don't have any of the things that I just mentioned. There's listening. Even if parents have more power than their children, which is appropriate, they're still listening. There's still respect for the opinions of other people. If it's a couple, they're trying to work out their differences. They're committed to learning how to listen to each other better. And the way I say it is learning to listen the way that you want to be heard and speak the way you want to be spoken to. And that has so disappeared on a societal level, I think. Again, because the role models we're receiving are not really about resolution. They're about who's going to win the battle. And so one of the beautiful things that psychotherapy and psychology have to offer our world today, and I call it the big missing piece, in our political discourse and in our policymaking, is that the best psychology is really about healing relationship. It's not about who wins. It's not a win-lose model. It's a win-win model. And I think that we desperately need to find that in our country and in our larger institutions, just like we need to find it in our homes. And that means, how do I tolerate the distress of you disagreeing with me? Will I take responsibility for myself and my actions, or do I feel justified in acting out on you because I believe you're wrong, or taking from you because I believe you're inferior, or whatever it is I do? Am I willing to reflect on myself and stop pointing the finger at you and really think about how I could do it differently? How could I talk to you differently that you might be open to what I have to say? When someone's yelling at me, I don't want to hear what they have to say, right? And if I'm yelling at them, they don't want to hear me. So we end up in these huge tug of wars because people are shouting each other down. And that's what's happening on a mass scale, I think, here. And of course, so nothing gets resolved. And one of the things I've shared this many times is that when I first became a therapist, I worked almost exclusively with children. And what I discovered pretty quickly after working with a number of children was that there was nothing wrong with them, whether they came for bedwetting or failing in school or not learning how to read or being aggressive toward their siblings or having, up at night with nightmares. There was really nothing wrong with them. They were suffering from the distress of their family. And usually it was very conflictual parents or a highly conflictual divorce and custody battle. And they were the symptom bearer for what was really going on in the family that they had no control over. And so the work was really family work, and the work ended up being with the people who were in charge, which was the parents. And that was the best access I found to helping the children. And I think if we just lift that whole structure and look at our country through that, if we have warring people in power, we're all suffering. And I think some people more than others, for sure. But, most of the people I know are highly distressed about the conflicts at the highest levels in this country and scared about the next election. And no matter who wins, frightened about the results. And so that family model really fits, that we really need to bring these skills and the determination to work things out to the highest levels of our societal functioning for our mutual benefit.
I hear a lot of people when we talk about the country being divided and the divide seems like it's growing. There are some people who say, well, the country's always been divided. So what changed, or what's made that situation worse?
Well, I think people don't always agree, and I don't think that's going to change. Right. So yeah, there have been different factions, and there certainly have been Republicans and Democrats and Libertarians and the Green Party and Independents and, people of different persuasions who have different beliefs about the economy and about religion and about abortion and about women and, equal rights and whatever it is. I think we're always going to have differences. In my lifetime, I have never seen it this entrenched, this hateful. I think there certainly have been issues that have come up, like segregation, that have really inflamed a lot of people. But we worked it out, and obviously we haven't really fully worked it out, but we've made some attempts to work it out, and there's some things that are better, and there's some things that are still really not good. But in my lifetime, I don't remember this kind of hateful discourse ever happening between the parties. I don't remember, and you heard stories of people reaching across the aisle and coming together around certain issues. And you heard stories of senators crossing the aisle and having good friends on the other side. I'm not trying to paint any kind of a Pollyanna picture, and we've certainly done terrible things, as a country, policy-wise, toward our own citizens. I don't remember this level of hatefulness, and I don't remember this level of, it seemed like after the whole civil rights movement got, more or less addressed. And again, I'm not pretending that it's finished by any means, because I know people are still really suffering from racial discrimination. But I think there was an agreement that was the right course to take, whether everybody ascribed to that or not. But I think there was an agreement that somehow morally we were moving in that direction. And I don't think that even exists anymore. But what I will say is, and I want to reiterate, because it's really an underlying theme of my book, we're being conditioned to believe that these great divides and the intense hostility and the violence and the threats of violence are the result of an ideological divide. And from a psychological point of view, that actually is not the truth. The truth is, as I see it, and I think that's the helpful truth, is that it's a mental illness issue, because mentally healthy people do not verbally assault each other. They don't threaten violence. They don't act hatefully. They don't discriminate against one group. Mentally healthy people are basically loving. They're basically kind. They're basically valuing of all other human life. They're willing to listen even when challenged. They may struggle to take feedback about themselves, but they're willing to listen to somebody else's issue with them and try to figure out, if they have a part to play and take some responsibility. Mentally healthy people are basically cooperative, and they have a sense of a balance between their individual needs and their individual beliefs and wants and desires and those of other people and the good of the whole. There's some negotiation between what's good for me and what's good for you and what's good for us. And is our relationship and maintaining connection and cooperation and care for one another our goal, or is my goal to just beat you at the game? And I think we really need to look at that as a country, because we're suffering.
What role do you feel like technology has played in that divide and widening that divide? Has that been a major contributing factor?
Well, this is what I would say. I think it's inextricable from our mental health, because one of the things that I say is anything that can be used can be misused. I think that's pretty much true. Yeah. So there's we all know there's amazing uses of technology. You and I wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation if technology had not exploded, right?
That's true, yeah.
I mean, I've talked on podcasts to people all over the world. It's incredible. And the information sharing. I used to have to go to the card catalog, find the book, hope it was in the library, and then hope it had the information I need. Now I just click Siri and I get the answer, So, there's endless things that technology has done that are incredible. So, of course, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. But to the extent that we're not mentally healthy, a lot has gone into the social media space that is contributing and purposefully contributing to making us more divisive, more hateful, and more superficial. In the sense of like, how do I appear? How many likes do I get? It's not real relationship. And so I think it both is a symptom of a lot of loneliness and a lot of people feeling like they really aren't valued or wanted in our society and trying to find some place to have some feeling of goodness about themselves or fit in. And then I think that technology in that way contributes to that. So it's very similar to what happens with us as individuals. If I'm coming out of my family really unhealthy on a mental health level or emotional health level, and I bring that to the world around me, and then I condone policies that are going to hurt a lot of people, then, the interplay between my own lack of emotional development or safety and the system's lack of emotional development and safety coincide. So I love your question, because one of the things that I've talked about is that just because we can do something technologically doesn't mean we should. And I think we really have to figure out what's good for human beings and not what's good for the rich or not what's good for the powerful, or you know what I'm saying? Or not what on the surface feels like it gives us a hit, but it doesn't actually connect us to one another.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like social media has become, I think, a major factor in that divide, and the algorithms that purposefully put us in our own echo chamber. And I think we get used to someone not disagreeing with us, and we get used to just hearing just reinforcing the same ideas, and not being open to hearing other ideas or being willing to hear someone out who you may disagree with, and just have a peaceful conversation. It seems like that's being lost, and it's troubling.
Very. And I propose, among many other things, what would it be like for us if we actually saw people from both sides of the aisle, let's just say it that way, role modeling, having a respectful, deeply listening conversation And maybe even being facilitated to have that by a trained facilitator who makes the space safe, like a therapist does or a mediator does. They sort of set up the boundaries and the guidelines to help people listen and curb their worst reactions because they want to be heard themselves. And I think we've forgotten that if we're not listening to the other person, they're not listening to us either.
It's very true. Yeah. It's very true. And I guess the follow-up to that is, are we too far gone? What can we do, or can we turn the ship around?
Well, I'm an optimist, so I believe the ship can be turned around. I don't think it's going to be easy. I think it would take a lot of hard work. But you know what? Going to therapy myself was a lot of hard work. And I never missed a session because I wanted to heal and I wanted the truth about myself. And I really wanted to salvage what I knew there was something essential in there. And I wanted that part to have life and really be able to be expressed in the world. So I think a lot of it has to do with our motivation. Do we want to go on this way? Do we want to just say, okay, there's going to be a civil war here, or we're headed toward World War III, and that's going to be the end of the human race? I don't want to do that. And I think so I do think there's hope. And, the hope of writing my book was to try to help educate people in a kind and respectful, non-blaming way about what's ailing us and what we could actually all do. So part of what we can all do is, some people have great spheres of influence. They're state representatives, or they run a large business, or they have a lot of influence in their church or their community or whatever. And some people don't. Some people, their circle is a few friends, their family, their kids, and their job. It doesn't matter what your sphere of influence is. And I say this all the time because, we also live in a society where it's the famous, the people that have 10,000 followers or 1 million followers that, are sort of like what we aspire to. But truly, one person can make a difference in another person's life. If I'm kinder to you, if I listen better when you're upset with me or you're just upset, if I'm a better friend, or if we're standing in line and I just smile at you instead of frowning at you and ignoring you, we don't know the ripple effect of our own loving, kind, cooperative, tolerant behaviors, what the ripple effect can be. And I know there's people that really influenced my life in a profound way who are no longer alive. They'll never know. But, they gave me that gift. And it changed something for me. So we can all be that. And the other thing is, if you're inspired to take action, if you want to take a bigger action, if you want to write to your editor, write a letter to the editor, or call your senator, or run for office, or change the policies in your workplace to make them more humane and more relational, do it,
Yeah. I think sometimes the hardest part is making that first step. And it seems like the hardest step to make is that first step to seek help, or to reach out to someone, or to find the help that you need. I think that's the first. It's tough.
I agree with you. And that's why I would reiterate what we talked about earlier. It takes courage, and it's so worth it. It's so worth it. If you commit to opening yourself up for your own healing, I think there's nothing better in this world than to heal our own pain, or be in the process of healing our own pain. Again, nobody probably does it totally perfect. Nobody, finishes their process and they're an enlightened human being. We're all on the road, but life can feel a lot better. And I can tell you from my own experience, I really didn't think there was light at the end of the tunnel for me. Some part of me got me to therapy. So it wasn't totally in my conscious mind. But I really didn't. I thought I'd be the person who goes to therapy and nothing would change. And so I want to say to people, and I've said to many clients, there is light at the end of the tunnel. I can tell you there is. I know it in my own experience. I've seen it for many, many people, and there's no reason why you can't find it too. And I think we have to hold that light for one another.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. And I do know some people who are hesitant to seek help because they're afraid of being prescribed a medication instead of it being different work. So is that something you should find when you do seek someone to speak with? Is that something you should discuss before, or is that a conversation you should have with someone that you're receiving help from?
Well, if it's something that you're worried about, for sure, bring it up. Anything that you're worried about, bring up, because you want to trust the person you're working with, right? So if you're holding back on a fear, they won't know it, and it will diminish part of the trust. So what I would say about medication is that first of all, I don't know anyone who's been forced to take medication.
Right.
A therapist might say, I think you might do well on an antidepressant for a while, but you have a choice whether or not you want to take it. And I don't think any good therapist would say, I won't work with you unless you, or whatever. I don't know anyone who would force you or try to force you to do that. I think a good therapist, if they really felt, and it's usually in cases where the level of functioning in a person's life is so diminished because of their emotional issue. It's usually depression, but it could be something else. It could be a more severe diagnosis like bipolar or something like that. Usually a therapist will be honest with you, but not push you. And then you have a choice to make, and I've had people that, what I was going to say is usually the recommendation for medication is when you really aren't functioning, when you can't get out of bed, when you're so explosive that you're alienating all the people around you, when you can't fulfill the requirements of your job. So it's that in those cases, sometimes medication is very helpful, either temporarily or on a long term, depending on what your own biochemistry is and your own situation is. But I think you need to feel, anyone who has that concern needs to feel it's a choice and that they don't have to choose it if they don't want to.
Yeah. I really do like your approach of what can we do, and it being just small steps for all of us that we can do every single day. And even, like you say, even just smiling at someone who's in line, or a good morning or something, just because those little things add up, and you could change the course of someone's day, or even more than that, just by a kind gesture for someone.
Absolutely. There was a very sad story I'll tell you, a happy one and a sad one. The sad story was that there was a man who had committed suicide. And when whoever, the police or his family, whoever went to his apartment, they found a note there that said, I'm going to jump off this bridge unless one person smiles at me when I'm walking along the way. And obviously no one did. And that's how lonely and isolated and totally, at a loss that person felt for human connection. And we live in a society today where we're losing that human connection for many, many reasons. We could talk for an hour about that. And then, another beautiful story is, and this is just sort of a little example, but I'm going to expound on it just a little bit. So one night, my husband and I and my adult daughter were having dinner, and our waitress was clearly in a bad mood, and she was very unfriendly. And, we could have said we want a new waitress, or we could have left. But my daughter looked up at her and she said, are you having a bad day? And her whole disposition changed because somebody saw her and somebody cared. And it was just that simple. And she said something, she didn't go into any detail, but it totally lit her up to be seen and cared for. It can be that small. And I can tell you, she could have been the person who wrote that note. We don't know. Yeah. We don't know the impact of our kindness.
Wow. Those are two very, very impactful stories for sure. Yeah. But yeah, so it's hard to transition from such serious topics to some lighter questions.
Sure.
Before I let you go.
Sure. So a
couple of questions I like to ask my guests. So the first one is, Was there ever a hobby or thing that you were excited to try, but when you tried it, you did not enjoy it?
Because I did enjoy a lot of the things that I tried. Let me see if there was one. I don't know. That's really a good question. I think I've really enjoyed the things that I've tried. You want to give me another one? And if something pops up, I'll tell you.
Yeah, sure. What is something that your readers would be surprised to learn about you?
Well, I've told you a lot.
Yeah.
I've told you a lot. Let's see. I guess, what would they be surprised to learn about me? Well, I don't know if they'd be surprised to learn this about me, but part of the depression that I suffered when I was in my 30s, I had 3 little children and I was in a really dysfunctional marriage. And it just took everything for me to get out of it. And it was really hard afterwards as well. So I don't know if you'd be surprised to learn this about me, but I made it through that dark night of the soul, and I'm in a wonderful marriage now. And so I guess I just want to, that's probably not a surprise, but I can't think about, I mean, I'm pretty forthcoming, so I don't know if I have any big secrets to tell you.
That's a good thing too. So the next one might be a little bit easier is, do you have any favorite family recipes?
Family recipes. Yes, I do have favorite family recipes. So I grew up in a Jewish family, and I loved the food that was cooked for the holidays. And so one of my favorite recipes, which my whole family adores, and anybody I make it for adores, is matzo ball soup. And I don't know if you've heard of that, but
yeah, really good.
Yeah, so that's a big one that my family they're always asking me to make that when they come visit. So
nice. It's a good feeling to know that you can create something that everyone enjoes, that brings everyone together.
Totally, and food is a great thing for that.
Yes, yeah, it really is. Especially now that as the weather's getting colder and we're typically together more, indoors. But
right.
The holidays. So the last question I have for you is, what was your first job, and what did you learn from that experience?
My first job was babysitting when I was in high school. That was my very first job. And I think I learned that, and maybe I already knew, but I learned that I loved working with children, that I wanted children. And many of my subsequent jobs were with children. Almost all of them were with children in different programs that I worked in. And then I started out my therapy career working with children. And then I changed that when I realized that their parents needed help.
Yes. I guess that's a pretty valuable lesson throughout your career, I would say, to see that connection, or where what's really the things that are harmful and the ways to resolve it, or to try and resolve it.
Right. Really, I mean, I've learned from my clients probably more than I've ever taught anybody,
Yeah. Exactly. But like you said, it's being a good listener, and you learn a lot just by listening to others. So
you do, and you hear yourself in other people. I mean, you can't help it. And sometimes I would think, wow, is this divinely orchestrated that this person came in with my issue? But I've heard other therapists say the same thing.
Yeah, it is like holding up a mirror when you do listen. And realize a lot about yourself too. So really great stuff. But thank you so much for taking some time out of your day. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate you and your great questions, and and the work that you do, because I think podcasting's an amazing use of technology.
Yeah. I try not to complain about technology too much, because, like you said, without it, we wouldn't be sitting here. So,
right.
So there's really wonderful things, but it's important to see, like you mentioned, the good and the bad, and
right.
Just because we can doesn't mean we should.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So for anyone looking for you or your work, where's the best place to find you?
Yeah. Well, the best place to find me is on my website, which is www.phyllisleavitt.com. And that's PhyllisLeavitt. And you can I've written 3 books American Therapy is my latest book. It's available from all major booksellers. And on my website, if you contact me or sign in for my newsletter, I have a free PDF on how to restore a relationship after conflict. What are the secrets of doing that? And then that's also a chapter in my book. But the PDF that I've put on my website is a little bit more personalized for your own use. I'm on, I have lots of interviews on YouTube, and I've written articles on Substack, and I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn and all the social media. But really, for anyone who's interested in just even having a conversation, please feel free to contact me on my website. And my business email is just my name, Phyllis at phyllisleavitt.com. So, I'm happy to converse with anyone who has anything they want to talk about. I'm not in practice anymore, though. I'm only focused on writing. But if you're looking for a therapist, I'd be happy to make a referral for you.
Oh, wow, that's wonderful. Yeah, I'm sure you'll have a lot of requests for that, which is very valuable.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hope to talk again soon.
Thank you. You have a wonderful day.
You too. Thank you.